Welcome to the VIBE event of B.linc Innovation, and we are unlocking the potential of Maori land today. And we have a wonderful guest speaker, Holden from Manaaki Whenua, and that will actually talk us through where we can find the key. And so we give this a little bit of a time so that everybody can actually get into the we already have 75 people coming in. So can you imagine that this will be face-to-face? Then at the moment we have 77 people already in the room. So I'll give it another 2 minutes or 1 minute, and we will actually start.
Cool.
So everybody, welcome that are actually coming into the room. This is the VIBE event, B.linc Innovation business unit of Lincoln University, where we're going to look for the key of so that we can unlock the potential of Maori lands. And our guest speaking, Holden from Manaaki Whenua today. Katie, am I good to start? I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay, let's start. Like I said, we are in the B.linc Innovation space. Normally we would have this face-to-face, but at the moment we are actually doing this virtual. This has an opportunity to welcome so many more guests, and we are expecting almost 200 guests today. And for the people that have already been here at Lincoln University at the B.linc workshop, we will never fit you into our physical space. So please welcome to our virtual space. B.linc Innovation is basically doing three things. We like to connect people. And if we start connecting these people, we hopefully get these people who actually start to talk to each other and have meaningful conversations, and hopefully then collaboration will actually start. And out of that collaboration, hopefully brilliant innovations will start that actually will bring our beautiful land forward. Some housekeeping. This is a virtual event, so please make sure that you know where your emergency areas are in the place where you are. For being a virtual event, if you want to, we stimulate you to interact with Holden, our guest speaker, and we want you to do that using the Q&A. What we are actually doing, rather than have a Q&A at the end, please make sure that you type your questions, because Holden is very much wants to do interactively approach that and look at your questions. This webinar will be recorded and will be emailed out to you. But the most important thing is that because you're muted, you really need to use the Q&A function, and Holden, our guest speaker, will definitely react to you as soon as he can. Since we love to get social with you and we love to connect to you, please connect with us and use the appropriate social platforms to do so. We will be more than honored to have you into our group. Looking into GFP, I need to stop talking. I need to give Holden the floor. He's the General Manager, Maori Partnerships at Manaaki Whenua. And he is actually based in the beautiful areas of the Taranaki, in Taranaki on the North Island, as you can already see perhaps in the background of his picture. So without further ado, I will basically give the floor to Holden. I am going to switch screens and then start his presentation. So bear with me, and then Holden, the floor is all yours.
Kia ora, Vim, o tira kia ora koutou katoa, ka nui te mihi atu ki a koutou. Yeah, just to clarify, that's virtual background, Vim, so I'm not actually up in Taranaki at the moment. My iwi affiliations are back into Taranaki. I'm based down in Wellington, but thank you all the same. And I suppose what I'll do, just a bit of quick background before I share my presentation. So, yep, I'm at Manaaki Whenua. I've been here for about 5 years. I've worked in the public sector for quite a bit of my career, and have particularly worked at Te Puni Kōkiri, which is the ministry responsible for administering the Māori Land Act, which I'll talk about in a moment. And as I say, I hail from Taranaki, Ngāti Maru Wharanui, Te Atiawa Taranaki Whānui ki te upoko o te ika, and I'll talk a bit about the connection there with Māori land as well. And so let's rock into it. Vim, if you would, please.
Yes, I think I'm sharing the screen at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, now, so unlocking the potential of Māori land, I've deliberately put a question mark at the end of that. It's not actually a complete sentence, of course, but I sort of wanted to pause for a moment and sort of look at that and say, well, in a nutshell, it's complex, and I'll talk a bit about why it's complex. But I also want to explore that framing of it even, because unlocking the potential of Māori land, it's already kind of framed in a certain way. Whose potential, for whose benefit, by whom, those sorts of things. These are questions I sort of thought it would be useful for us to explore as we go through my kōrero today, because it is quite important. The way we frame the question around Māori land, I think, needs to be slightly framed differently. I really liked your analogy there, Vim, around myself being able to provide the key to unlock the potential of Māori land, but I suppose what I'm suggesting is we need to reframe that proposition, if you like. So next, please, Vim. So what is Māori land? I might just put it over to everyone in this virtual space today and sort of see if anyone wants to have a go at answering that question. What is Māori land? It's not a trick question, by the way.
So dear participants, please use the Q&A button and to interact with Holden.
It might be a bit too... Oh, here we go. Let's have a look. Not crown-owned land. Not quite, no. Whakapapa whenua, that's getting a little bit closer. I might just go Article 1 or Article 2. Something to do with te tiriti, yes. All of Aotearoa. I like that. I do like that. Yes. Any other answers? Melanie. Oh, here we go. Now I just need to scroll down. Owned by iwi. Interesting. Partly correct, but actually not entirely. Is that Melanie Mark Shadbolt? Possibly. Don't know. Any others? Here we go. A couple more. Land traditionally held and cared for by iwi. Yes. I might actually, I'll stop I'll turn off my question and answer thing now, because I think I've had enough. If we could go to the next slide, please, Vim. Those were all good responses. Thank you. So essentially, Māori land, in its legal definition, is land that is subject to the Māori Land Act 1993, or Te Ture Whenua Māori 1993, so the Māori Land Act. Essentially in Aotearoa, you have two classes of freehold land, if you like. Broadly speaking, you've got general land, which is all private land, and I guess conservation estate and everything else. And then you've got Māori freehold land. It's called Māori freehold land, but for our purposes, we'll call it Māori land, subject to the Māori Land Act. And the Māori Land Act, and I can't just, we haven't got time tonight, but the Māori Land Act is a product of a long history of land alienation, treaty breaches, and a whole bunch of other things, which I can't go into. We haven't got time. But essentially, Te Ture Whenua Māori is the act that governs Māori land. Next, please, Vim. Just pop any questions you've got. Oh, look, there's another question here. Oh no, land that has a relationship, that Māori have a relationship with. Yes, that I agree with that, but for our purposes, we're going to talk about Māori land that's subject to the Māori Land Act. So this is Te Ture Whenua Māori 1993. So the purpose of the act is to, under clause 2.9 is to balance the often competing interests of retaining Māori land and Māori ownership with the development of the land. So to find that balance between retaining Māori land and developing it. And the Act, if you look at, sorry about all the words, by the way, so focus on those highlighted bits. 2.10, the Act is designed to promote the retention, use, development and control of Māori land as a taonga tuku iho by owners, their whānau, their hapu and their descendants. So next please, Vin. So, so we'll just pause there. So as a result of the Act, there are a number of restrictions around what you can do with Māori land and on Māori land. The first one there, and again, apologies for the words, the fact that there'll be a lot of words on this slide, but I kind of need to get this detail down. No one has the legal capacity to alienate any interest in Māori freehold land unless it is done so in accordance with the Act. And I have to say the Act is very stringent around what circumstances would allow you to actually alienate Māori freehold land, to sell Māori freehold land. Next, please, Vin. No owner has the legal capacity to dispose of their interest in Māori land through a will, except in accordance with the Act. So in other words, yeah, it's very restrictive. Thank you. No interest in Māori land is legally able to be taken for payment of an owner's debts or liabilities. Now, this is an important one. You can imagine that doesn't make Māori land very attractive to a bank as security. Very good. Good timing there, Vim, on those bullet points flying in like that. Māori freehold land cannot be charged, sold or leased by local authorities for the non-payment of rates, except in accordance with the Act. Oh no, we'll go back one, please. Oh, there we go, yeah. Except in accordance with the Act. Now, a lot of Māori land historically was in fact taken for non-payment of rates, I have to say. So the new Act attempts to protect what small amount of Māori land is left. Next, please, Vim. Right, now I'm just going to pause there again. What's the bankruptcy exception? Oh, that's a good one. Can we flick back to the previous slide, please, Vim? Bankruptcy. No interest in Māori land is legally able to be taken. Oh, yeah. So an exception is a case of bankruptcy. If you're made bankrupt and you're an owner of Māori land, then your land might be taken. I imagine that would be extremely rare though, and I'll explain why in a moment. That would be extremely rare. Yeah. Let's flick back to the map. Thanks, Vim. Just so you know, I've turned it this way so you can kind of get a closer picture of the detail. So Māori land loss over time. So prior to 1860, there was essentially this vast tract of land in Aotearoa called customary land. Now, the treaty had placed certain restrictions on how you could deal with the indigenous tangata whenua of Aotearoa around their land. And the Native Land Court in 1860 or thereabouts was established to essentially individualize title so that individuals could then decide whether they wanted to sell their bit or not. And that's, I haven't shown the South Island. The reason I haven't shown the South Island is because the history of the South Island is quite different. There were 3 or 4, I think, large purchases, I say purchases, quote unquote, that were the subject subsequently of the Ngaitahu Treaty settlement, but that's what basically involved selling most of the South Island, and the top of the South Island is a bit different. It's a more complex overlay there, but essentially in the North Island, all that that maroon area there in 1860 was what Māori still owned. It was customary land. By 1890, that customary land, or after 1860, it started being individualized and turned into Māori freehold land. And then in 1890, by 1890, you can see there, quite a lot had been sold. And I say sold because actually it wasn't a great situation in that you often had the native, what was then the native land court, making determinations on selling land based on hearings. It pitted families against families, essentially, the native land court. It was an instrument of land alienation, nothing more, nothing less. Essentially, so by 1939, you wind up with that area there, the maroon area, and that that bottom left one there is essentially what Māori land is left. Māori land subject to the now Māori Freehold Land Act, the Māori Land Act, Te Ture Whenua Māori. I'm just going to pause there because there's another little thing that's come up. Large case in Northland. Yes. Yes, there's still, yeah. Next, please, Vim. Right, so the Māori freehold land or Māori land is essentially, there's about 1.4 million hectares, about 5% of New Zealand's land mass is Māori freehold land. That's the red and the green. So the green is an interesting category of Māori freehold land. It's almost what I suppose you might call it a subcategory of Māori freehold land called Whenua Rāhui. Does anyone want to tell me what Whenua Rāhui is? I'll answer that question in a moment. Whenua Rāhui is essentially covenanted land that DOC helps Māori landowners administer for purposes of essentially protecting and enhancing the cultural and the cultural values and connections associated with that land. Whenua Rāhui is a subcategory of Māori land. I think there's about 180,000 hectares of Whenua Rāhui, which is a subcategory of the broader 1.4 million hectares of Māori land. And now I will answer this question. How much land has moved back to Māori land since 1939? Moved back to Māori land? I would be very surprised if that number was large. Yeah. I know there are cases where land has been turned back into, from general land back into Māori land, but they would be rare because actually, in many cases, the restrictions are actually not helpful in some ways. The restrictions, and when I say restrictions, the restrictions that the Māori Land Act place on management of Māori land are not helpful. You can't get a loan from the bank, you know, there's a whole bunch of things you can't do. Well, particularly you can't get finance. So why would you move it back into Māori land? Unless you really wanted to protect it as a cultural significant site. But I'm not aware, I don't know the answer to that question, how much is it moved back? Short answer. Another question here. How much land, does that include QE2 covenanted Māori land? QE2 covenanted land is different to Māori, QE2 covenanted land is different to Whenua Rāhui land. Similar, they both have covenants over them, but Whenua Rāhui covenants are different to QE2 covenants. You can see now why I said in my first slide, it's complex, eh? Yeah. Some of the land changed to general under the 67 Act has subsequently changed back to. Oh, fantastic, thank you. I wonder how much. Does Haynes know how much perhaps? Oh yeah, some good questions coming through. Unsure, okay. I'm not sure it would be a lot. Some of the, what about the uriwera? Te uriwera is different. I'm going to turn my question box off because it's just distracting me. Te uriwera is different. So te uriwera is a return of conservation land back to the tribal entity, and the vesting of that land into its own legal personality. It's very different. In fact, it's the first of its kind in the world. So it was conservation land, and then it was vested in itself, and it was given its own legal personality, and it became te uriwera. Te kawao te uriwera, I think, is the concept they use. Tūhoe te uriwera has has its own legal personality, and so it's not Māori freehold land subject to te ture whenua Māori, is, I guess, the short answer. Is land owned by Māori corporations also classified Māori land? Yes, it is. So essentially there are two types of land trusts, Māori land trusts. There are trusts, and there are different categories of trusts. You've got whānau, ahu whenua, whenua tōpū, and kaitiaki trusts. And then you've got Māori corporations. They have different legal frameworks. They're both subject to Te Ture Whenua Māori, to the Māori Land Act, but they have different legal frameworks applying to both. You've got more flexibility in Māori corporations to commercialise your land, as opposed to ahu whenua and the other categories of land trust, Māori land trust. It's really hard. I can't see heads nodding to sort of see if I've answered the question adequately. But anyway, I'll keep going. Māori can buy rural land. Māori can buy rural land without it being subject to the Act, right? Māori can buy any land without it being subject to the Act. That's the short answer to that question. So Ngāi Tahu, for example, can purchase land, general land, without it being subject to Te Ture Whenua Māori. The only land that is subject to Te Ture Whenua Māori is Māori freehold land, or Māori land subject to Te Ture Whenua Māori. Sorry, that I know that's circular, but a tribal entity can purchase land in its own right, is the short answer. And it will be general land, if that makes sense. Here's another one. Has there been much land purchased back via the right of first refusal? So that's a good question, but we're getting now into post-settlement governance entities. That's a whole nother seminar. The right of first refusal is generally given to post-settlement tribal entities that have settled their treaty claim. What we're talking about here is Māori land subject to the Māori Land Act 1993. Yeah, they're not treaty. Well, they're not. They have brought, some of them have brought treaty claims, but they generally don't get recognition as post-settlement. They're not tribal entities as such. Oh, this is really, I can't tell if any of this is being understood. I'll keep going. Next, please, Vim.
Well, you have me sitting on the edge of my chair, Holden. So if that's any help for you, that yeah, I'm learning.
Thank you.
You already know that I'm only a guest in this beautiful land. Thank
you, Vim. Appreciate that. So yeah, so I guess in a nutshell, the key thing there is that Māori land subject to Te Ture Whenua Māori is a very specific category of land, and there's only 1.4 million hectares of it. Now, land use capability. Land use capability is essentially a, sorry, I'll look at this. Oh, thank you, anonymous attendee. So land use capability is a layer that Manaaki Whenua is responsible for. You'll see there are 8 categories of land. Sorry, I didn't number them, but essentially it goes from extremely fertile, extremely versatile land with virtually no limitations, dark green, down to land with very severe to extreme limitations or hazards that make it unsuitable for cropping, pasture or forestry. That's class 8, and as opposed to class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Next, please, Vim. So essentially, this is the land use capability map that Manaaki Whenua is the kaitiaki for, I suppose. And you can see there extremely versatile land on those, the Waikato hauraki there, the plains. Sorry, I can't scroll with my mouse because Vim's thing, but yeah, but you can see up on the volcanic plateau just south of Lake Taupo there, extremely limited land use options there. Thank you. And on the tip of Mount Taranaki, you'll know where that is, Vim, because you've visited there. Yep, extremely limited. But here's an interesting thing. So I'm from Taranaki. From my perspective as an uri and a descendant of that maunga, that's the most important part of that maunga. You know, that's the most tapu part of the maunga, arguably. Well, it's all he tupuna. Yeah. I suppose the point I'm trying to make is, if we could, sorry, if we go back to the last slide, thanks, Vim. Land use capability is a very Western assessment of what land is and how it should be treated. It's a very Western paradigm in terms of what can you use the land for, what's its best, highest and most productive use. It's quite an extractive approach. Okay, next, please, Vim. Thank you. Next, thank you. Now, this layer is the land cover database that Manaaki Whenua also looks after. And you'll see there, this is a different, sorry, I should have put the legend on this map, but essentially you can see there that very dark green is all indigenous forest up into the Te Urewera. Someone mentioned Te Urewera. Vim, did you visit Te Urewera in your travels over the last couple of years?
Unmuted. No, I did not, Holden. But like okay. That's by the sounds of it, that needs to be put on my list.
Absolutely. So that's the most solid block of dark green there, and then just to the west, just to the west of Te Urewera, you've got that lighter, sort of slightly brighter green. That's indigenous forest. Sorry, that's exotic forest. So that's all the Central North Island CNI tribes, CNI iwi, the Tree Lords deal. That all went back to iwi. A lot of that area went back to iwi, and yeah. So, and then the slightly more shaded area. The brown stuff is. Oh, I need to look at my legend, but the key thing there is that the indigenous forest is that dark green, and the exotic forest is the brighter green. The pale green is essentially pasture land. Next, please, Vim. Okay, apologies for you don't need to read all of this, but the key thing you do need to try and hold on to is that 76% of Māori land, 76%, more than 3/4, is class 6, 7 or 8. Quite limited, highly limited or severely limited in its arable use. Very erosion prone, severe limitations and hazards, as you can see there. So I've grouped up those 3 class 6, 7 and 8 land, totals 76.3% of the total land area of Māori land in Aotearoa. So you're already off to a bad start if you want to unlock the potential of Māori freehold land. I'm going to pause there and look at the questions. I ran a session like this last week and it was hard not seeing faces. I'm sure we're all very engaged. Thank you, Elsa. Ben Smith, how big, oh, here's a question. How big an impact did the Liberal government between 1891 and 1911 have on the loss of Māori land? I don't know the answer. I'm not a historian. All I know is between 1860, when the Native Land Court was established, and 1939, it was all downhill. And in fact, even after 1939 through to 1967, I think was the previous act, the Māori Land Act, predecessor of the 93 Act was the 1967 Act. Even up to that, it was still pretty bad. From 1967 on to 1993, it was pretty bad, but not as bad. And in 1993, you know, those unjust takings were essentially stopped altogether. But I mean, you know, you've got these examples in as recently as the 80s where uneconomic, less than 10 owners, there was a less than 10 owner rule. If there were less than 10 owners, the Māori Land Court, oh, you lost it. You know, it's just, yeah. Did this period have a key influence on European changes being applied to whenua? I'm not sure. I don't know. Sorry, I'm a bit confused by that question. Class 6, 7, and 8 points to tourism, not farming. Now, there's an interesting comment. Yes. Now, I'll switch that off again. And I will just, thanks for that comment. I'll go to the next slide. Right, so, okay, we're leaving behind the fact that the vast majority of Māori land is class 6, 7, or 8. The land cover of Māori freehold land is an interesting picture as well. 61% is forest, scrub, or shrubland cover, and a lot of it is beautiful, indigenous, you know, original indigenous cover. Hasn't been, you know, it's in pristine condition. So the opportunities for ecotourism are really definitely there, without a doubt. Next, please, Vim. Right, so some more challenges associated with Māori freehold land. Māori freehold land is extremely fragmented. If you recall that slide, that first slide that I showed, you know, actually there'll be a number coming up shortly, but yeah, average size is 43 hectares and the average number of owners in one block is 111. Can you imagine trying to decide what to do with family land when there's 111 of you and you don't even know half of each other because you've all just been, you know, because of the process of colonization has done what it's done, and so we'll go to the next bullet point, please, Vim. Multiple ownership, that's the problem. It's a real challenge. Multiple ownership is really difficult, but it's also its strength, and we'll get to that in a moment. I'm just going to pause for a moment. You keep zooming them up, thanks, Vim. So as you can see, there are a lot of challenges. So around 28 years, there are just a lot of challenges. That absentee owner problem is a real problem. So a lot of, I don't even know all the land blocks that I have interests in because I haven't gone to the Māori Land Court or to the records and found out what my dad's interests were. You know, I know some of the blocks and I have an active role in them, but crikey, it would be a full-time job looking after your fragmented absentee interests around the motu, you know. Many land blocks have no management, and this is a real challenge. There's no management. 16,890 blocks. Not a huge percentage of the total area, but a lot of blocks. And the majority of those blocks would be administered by the Māori trustee. Where there's no management, they'll tend to be administered by the Māori trustee. I've got another question here. I'll take the 3.1 million hectares were lost in the North Island in this period in order to establish traditional pastoral farming land. Thank you, Ben. So a lot of challenge, a lot of issues associated with developing, unlocking the potential of money. I'm using these quotation marks because I want to come back to that. Next, please, Vim. You know, and actually this is the key slide in my books. This is the key slide. Next, please, Vim. While a high proportion, and I came across this quote from a Office of the Auditor General report on Māori freehold land, and he or she captured this thing really beautifully. This is the succinct kind of gist of the problem, or not the problem, the distinction. While a high proportion of Māori land is unsuitable for development in economic terms, cultural and spiritual ties to the land are often more important to Māori landowners than the ability to profit from the land. So that's a really key thing to keep in mind. And I'll just look at this. It looks like there's a question. Can you put up a link to help people discover their whenua they have interests in? I can certainly, you go to the Māori Land Court, Māori Land Online, Māori Land Online. Next, please, Vim. So, oh yeah, and to a more specific answer to that last question, the other thing you can do is you can go to Whenua Viz. Whenua Viz is a Manaaki Whenua managed platform, and those are the Māori land blocks there. You can click on a block. It's actually now hosted through tupu.nz, I think it is, and TPK hosts it on their platform as well, but it's a Manaaki Whenua layer, I guess. And the things you can do, you can click on a parcel that you know you've got an interest in and get information on that parcel. So you don't need to read all of that slide, but that just gives you a sense of what is available publicly without actually having to get an expensive consultant report. Next, please, Vim. And this is the type of information you can get from Whenua Viz. You can get what proportion of your block is class 7, 8, 6, and 4. I'm not sure why those numbers come up in that order, but that particular block, Tatarakina C block has 50%, 57% is class 7, 28% is class 8, and so on. Next, please, Vim. So these, you drill down, you can get a report on the soil properties of the land. The soil properties of the land is another layer that Manaaki Whenua administers, that we look after, and you can click through into the soil properties of the land if you know which block you're in. Oh, in fact, you can click on, it's public. It's public. Bear with me. Does interest in land get passed on to children on death? Short answer, no. You have to succeed. You have to apply to the Māori Land Court to succeed to your interests in Māori land. That's one of the challenges. A lot of people have not succeeded to their interests in Māori land. The interest just sits there, and the descendants, the uri, remain disconnected from their land, sadly. But you know, there's uncontacted owners lists and that sort of thing that trusts try and maintain. As Māori landowners, we're constantly trying to reach out to our people and reconnect them to their whenua. But short answer is no. You have to apply to the Māori Land Court to succeed to your interests in Māori land. Karawi, thank you, Cody. This is an amazing. Yeah, it is really good. Yeah, it is a good resource. But this is, you know, you've got to know where to go, and you know, if you want to really assess your land use opportunities and what you might do on that land, you probably need to go more detailed than even this. Next, please, Vim. So rather than say, well, what can the land be used for? how can we unlock, where is the key, what is the potential use of this land, which is all framed in a very Western paradigm. What I'm suggesting is that we look at it in terms of what are the Māori values and aspirations that the uri or descendants of that land have for their land themselves, and understanding the key components of Māori knowledge, values, assets, taonga, the challenges associated with the Māori governance, the multiple ownership. You know, what are the values and aspirations that the collective of owners have for their land? You know, that's a better question to ask, rather than how might we unlock the potential of Māori freehold land. It's a bit yeah, it's important to have an economic return on your land, but it's not top of the list. Next, please. Thank you. So this is just something to give you a sense of the complexity, you know. It is complex. If you want to unlock the potential of Māori land, it's complex. There are no baselines for indigenous rongoa species, how you might sort of get an economic return off kawakawa, for example. There's no baseline for that. It's all, you know, it's complicated. And there'll be competing aspirations even within the collective of owners themselves. Some of the older generation just want to continue to get their dividend every year off the grazing license that they've got on the land from the local farmer. But some of the young ones are going, well, no, hang on, we want to restore the Māori of the whenua, you know, and what can we do to do that? How can we do that? So there are competing multiple aspirations within Māori land ownership collectives, if that makes sense. Oh, crikey, there's a whole lot of questions. Some we have Māori land law centres that can help connect, like e.g. Ngāi Law Centre. Very good. If you succeed to the land, do you then take on responsibilities for rates or other costs? Oh, look, if you succeed to your interests in land, I don't know the answer to the question, but I would encourage uri descendants to succeed to their interests in land, because it's better to be connected to your land in some way than not, you know. And often the annual general meeting is the only time the whānau gets together, you know. So they're not tribal entities as such, but they're very much part of the Māori community. They're part of how Māori descendants can reconnect to their whenua. Michael, can shareholders trade their shares with other shareholders? That's a good question. I believe you can. I do recall my father buying some shares in a land trust that I'm in off, but you've got to still be within a certain class of shareholders. It's got to be within the whānau, if you like. Yeah. How far away is the carbon sequencing capacity of these blocks, given the changes? Sorry, I have no idea. Next slide, please, Vim. Yeah, sorry, I think this slide is in the wrong place, but this just gives you a sense of the land cover for Māori land blocks. It's slightly different to the overall New Zealand land mass. Bear in mind that, so the pie chart on the left is total 27 million hectares of Aotearoa, yep. And the vast majority, as you can see there, is pastoral, if you recall. All of that, and most of that indigenous would be conservation land and so on. You're kind of comparing apples with oranges here, an apple being the total country and the orange being Māori land. No, that's not a good analogy. I guess what I'm trying to say is that one on the left is the whole of New Zealand. The one on the right is Māori land. So there's a lot of indigenous forest on Māori land, 33%. Not much less in the overall country, but the distinction is that the overall country would all be locked up in DOC estate, and whereas the 33% of the 1.4 million hectares of Māori land that's indigenous is under our control. It's under Māori control. Not a good word to use, but we are the owners of that, not DOC. Sorry, I didn't explain that very well. Yes, I have bought and sold Māori land, and correct needs to be amongst whānau. I think they call it the preferred class of alienee. The strict legal definition is the preferred class of alienee. You have to whakapapa back to the original tūpuna. Thank you, Ricky. Oh, Ricky, we might be related or higher. Sorry, okay, next. So this is just an example. Yeah, so up on whānau Apanui country, this is an example of a lot of it is indigenous, of course. And you might recall that first map that I put up, a good chunk of that is actually covenanted in Whenua Rahui. So there'll be a covenant across a big chunk of that Māori land up there, a Whenua Rahui covenant. Vast majority indigenous here. Fair bit of Kānaka right on the tip there. Deciduous hardwood. Sorry, this map's not big enough, but yeah, so you get a sense of what's up there. Next, please, Vim. Oh, this was just a little bit of a. So this, anyone want to hazard a guess at what this map represents? This is the tribal area of interest overlay that's available on Te Puni Kōkiri's Te Kāhui Māngai website. And these are important because these tribal area of interest overlays determine who has kaitiaki status within an area. And you'll get a sense there, it's complicated up the top of the South Island. Obviously the vast bulk of the South Island, it's clear, it's Ngāi Tahu, but then even within Ngāi Tahu, that's not just a single tribe, it's multiple tribes in a way. And the North Island is very complex, see? But where we were just looking at on Whānau Apanui country there, oh, sorry, my mouse, just on, if you go to East Cape, please, Vim. Yep, a little bit further to the right. Yeah, just around there where we were looking just a moment ago, that's clear. That's Whānau Apanui to the west and Ngāti Porou to the east. Yeah. Raukumara Ranges, this is where they have those whakapapa connections between each other. I guess my point here was that this is also all Māori land. And it has relevance from a statutory perspective too, because under the Resource Management Act, the Conservation Act, particularly the Conservation Act requires the Crown to give effect to the principles of Te Tiriti, or the treaty. I think those are the words under Section 4 of the Conservation Act. It's a very proactive act, and I think that will be the future way that things go, is that there'll be more giving effect to the principles of the treaty around conservation land. And I'm just going to check for, how am I going for time? Iwi rohe. Yeah, thank you, Genevieve. Iwi land ownership. Not sort of right, not quite, because iwi rohe tend to be, the vast majority of iwi rohe are not actually owned by the iwi, but they still have kaitiaki status. They still are mana whenua. They still are responsible for protecting the mauri of the land, even though they don't own it. So that's a good question. Could we have a link to this website, please? If you just Google TKM, and it'll come up to Kāhui Māngai, and you can scroll through the maps, the areas of interest by iwi. Okay, it looks like there's another, no open questions. Kapai. Next, please, Vin. Sorry, I'm rushing a bit, I'm conscious of time. And I thought I'd just finish on this example because in some ways, what happens to the future of your whenua depends on where your whenua is. I hail from Ngāti Maru Wharanui up in Taranaki and Te Aotearoa down here in Pōneke in Wellington. We were fortunate enough to end up with a small piece of land that we were able to swap with another part of our rohe. And some of you might have seen this as you drive around Evans Bay to go to the airport. This is a papakainga. This is Māori freehold land. There's about 1,100 owners. I'm an advisory trustee. The Māori trustee is the responsible trustee. And we were fortunate enough to have, well, my cousin actually, Jamie Tuta, was the Māori trustee at the time, and he was able to underwrite the loan. And for that reason, and that reason alone, the bank gave us money. And that's the only reason that initiative got off the ground. I'm now a proud trustee, advisory trustee of 14 affordable papakainga units, 10 3-beddies, 4 single beddies. We give preference to our own uri. Those are the descendants of the original, those are the 1,100 owners. And then if there's no one on that list, we give preference to Te Aotearoa Taranaki Whānui. And if there's no one on that list, we give preference to uri or Taranaki. And if there's no one on that list, then it's income related rent subsidy, and anyone can go in there. And it won awards. This thing, I'm very proud of this papakainga. It won awards for architectural design, and yeah. So I might just pause there. So if we could go back to the original, the first slide, please, Vim. The very first slide. So in summary, it's complex, and there's a lot of moving parts, and but I think there are some exciting opportunities. As someone made the comment, Māori tourism, ecotourism, there's a real future there. A lot of these blocks are contiguous with conservation blocks. They tend to be the steep hill country bush land that is contiguous with conservation land. So, you know, there are opportunities for ecotourism, definitely. There are opportunities for indigenous forest products, you know, and we just need to put a little bit of, we actually put, Manaaki Whenua put a MB Endeavour bid in on this type of thing, Whenua order, which I can't remember the name of the kaupapa, but it was around giving effect to Māori landowners' aspirations for their own land, but unfortunately it didn't get funded. I think I'll leave it there. I've run out of puff, Kim. Vim, sorry.
Hey, thanks very much, Holden. This was really interesting, and really appreciated that. And I'll put on my, you can actually see me as well. How can I do that? Yes, there you go. This was really interesting because, like, if it was really interesting because, like, we tried to put our Western, and we is probably more me than anybody else. I put my Western perspective, my Western lens on this, and say, well, there is marginal land. There must be opportunity. Let's us fix this. But of course, like basically what you showed us, it is, we talked about unlocking Maori land, but basically I think that you showed us there is not one lock and there is not one key. And I think what you showed us as well, Holden, is that we need to embrace the diversity to find those keys and to be able to unlock the potential. And really insightful. Thank you so much. And I think most of the time when you are in a Zoom or in a webinar, you see some participants disappearing, but like, no. So you did really well. Thank you so much, Holden. I really appreciate it. and this was really insightful.
Thank you.
There are a couple of no, these are all great, and there are some Maori words written there as well that I do apologize, guys. I'm a guest in this beautiful land, so I don't speak Te Ao Maori, so but I assume that these are all very positive. Holden, thank you so much.
Just before we do wrap up, though, Vim, thank you for facilitating, but also if viewers are keen to get a copy of the slide deck, I'm more than happy to share that.
Hey, thank you so much, Holden. And what I'll do is, before we just end, I will share my. Hold on, what is happening? I lost everybody. Yeah, here we are back. Share screen. And of course, then when I like to do this, it doesn't work.
It's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always the same. And no, I don't want to do that. So no, you don't want to see my car. Okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna the good old piece of paper, and basically. Holden, thank you so much. There are a couple of more events coming up. On the 24th of March, we have Regenerating the Meat Industry. That will be, again, an online event. 24th of March from 9 to 11:30, and we're going to look at the regenerating the meat industry in New Zealand. On the 31st of March, we have an activated session, and those activated sessions are really cool, where you can come in and you actually can talk to Jason McRae from the Canterbury Employers Chamber of Commerce, and he will help you with your business idea. Then on the 14th of March, we're actually looking at innovation, changing the future of agriculture. And again, that will be a Zoom webinar, and an hour, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And to really, the people that are really ready to transform the food, fiber, and agri-tech sector, there are applications open for the Food, Fiber, and Agri-tech Challenge. And so look, it is powered by Christchurch NZ, and the delivery partners are Lincoln University and Canterbury University. And then, of course, in June 21st and 22nd, there is BOMA, the Agri Summit in Christchurch, and a very well event if you just want to be challenged in your thinking, because sometimes if you look at it from one side, you haven't seen the other side. So I think that is very much there I want to leave you with. Thank you so much for listening into this B.linc VIBE event. Thank you so much, Holden, for actually giving us the learnings that we need to look at things from a whole lot of different perspectives. And it's not one key and not one lock. There are multiple. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ka kite koutou.